The leather portfolio hit the glass table with a sound that made everyone in the boardroom stop breathing. I stared at the document inside. Majority shareholder agreement, 72% ownership of North Star Pharmaceuticals. My name already printed on every signature line. Congratulations, Miss Reed, the lawyer said. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching my aunt's husband across the table, Derek Walsh, the man who'd been running my grandmother's company for the past 3 months. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, Derek said, leaning back in his chair like he owned it. This should be interesting. I should probably back up. 3 months ago, my grandmother passed away. Catherine Reed, the woman who built North Star from nothing. She started with one small research lab in Halifax and turned it into a pharmaceutical company worth $85 million. They were developing treatments for rare diseases, life-saving medications that the big companies wouldn't touch because the patient populations were too small to be profitable. Gran raised me. My parents died in a car accident when I was 6, and she took me in without hesitation. While other kids spent summers at camp, I spent mine in her lab. She taught me to read financial statements before I learned algebra. By the time I was 16, I understood more about drug development pipelines than most business school graduates. We were close, or at least I thought we were. When she died, I was devastated. But I had to hold it together because Aunt Patricia, Gran's daughter, was falling apart. She'd always had a difficult relationship with Gran. Patricia wanted nothing to do with the pharmaceutical business. She became an architect, moved to Toronto, barely visited. Then 5 years ago, she married Derek Walsh. Derek was smooth, handsome in that aging executive way. He said he worked in corporate consulting. Gran never liked him. I remember one Christmas dinner where she pulled me aside and said, "That man looks at my company the way wolves look at sheep." At the funeral, Derek was supportive, attentive. He held Patricia's hand and said all the right things. 2 weeks later, he suggested that since Patricia was too grief-stricken to deal with Gran's affairs, he should step in as interim CEO of North Star. Just temporarily. Just until things got sorted out. Patricia agreed immediately. She signed a power of attorney. Derek moved into Gran's office the next day. I was 26. I'd just finished my MBA. I'd been working at a tech startup in Vancouver, and I flew home for the funeral planning to stay a week. But something felt wrong. Derek was too comfortable in Gran's chair, too quick to make changes. "We need to modernize," he told the board. "Catherine built something remarkable, but she was old-fashioned. We need aggressive growth strategies." I attended that board meeting. I wasn't a board member, but I'd grown up around these people. Dr. James Okonkwo, Gran's research director. Helen Martinez, the CFO. They looked uncomfortable. But Derek had Patricia's proxy vote, and Patricia owned 30% of the company. He acted like that made him untouchable. "What kind of growth strategies?" I asked. Derek smiled at me like I was a child asking about grown-up things. "We're exploring partnerships with larger pharmaceutical companies. Licensing agreements, maybe selling some of our less profitable research divisions." "Gran would never approve of that," I said. "Those less profitable divisions are researching treatments for children with genetic disorders." "Your grandmother was sentimental," Derek said. "Business is business." That's when Dr. Okonkwo spoke up. "Actually, Derek, I think you should know that Catherine left specific instructions about who would inherit controlling interest in North Star." Derek's smile flickered. "What do you mean?" "There's a will, a very detailed will. Her lawyers have been processing it. They've called a mandatory board meeting for next week." That was 3 days ago. Now, I was sitting in this boardroom, looking at documents that said I owned almost 3/4 of my grandmother's company. The room was silent except for the sound of Derek's pen tapping against the table. Tap. 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 "I don't understand," Patricia said. She looked pale. "Mom left the company to Sophie? But I'm her daughter." The lawyer, a woman named Miss Ashford, adjusted her glasses. "Catherine's will is very clear. She left the house in Bedford to you, Patricia, along with a trust fund worth approximately $2 million. But North Star Pharmaceuticals goes to Sophie, along with the research facility, the patent portfolio, and all associated assets. This is absurd, Derek said. The tapping stopped. Sophie is 26 years old. She's never run a company. She's been working at some tech startup, making what, $60,000 a year? And Catherine thought she should control an $85 million pharmaceutical company? I worked in Grand's lab every summer from the time I was 14, I said quietly. She taught me everything about this business. Playing scientist as a teenager doesn't qualify you to be CEO, Derek snapped. Then he caught himself and forced another smile. Sophie, I don't mean to be harsh, but you have to understand. Your grandmother built something important here. We can't let it fall apart because of sentimentality. Patricia and I have been discussing this. We think the best solution is for you to maintain nominal ownership, while I continue to run daily operations. You can learn the business gradually. I don't think that's what Gran wanted, I said. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly at the end, Derek said. She was 81 years old. She was on medication. I'm sure if we examined the circumstances under which this will was written. Are you suggesting you want to challenge the will? Miss Ashford interrupted. Her voice was ice. I'm suggesting we need to be practical, Derek said. For the good of the company. Dr. Okonkwo stood up. He was a tall man, and when he stood, everyone paid attention. I've worked with Catherine Reed for 32 years. She was sharp as a tack until the day she died. This will was written 4 years ago and updated 6 months ago. She knew exactly what she was doing. Sophie doesn't even live in Nova Scotia anymore, Patricia said. She sounded desperate. How is she supposed to run a company from Vancouver? I've already resigned from my position in Vancouver, I said. I'm moving back to Halifax. That was true. I'd given notice the day after Dr. Okonkwo called to tell me about the will. My apartment was already sublet. My life was packed into boxes. Derek's face went hard. You've made a lot of decisions very quickly. I've had 3 months to think about it, I said. While you've been sitting in Gran's office? The meeting didn't end well. Miss Ashford explained that there would be a transition period. Derek would remain as acting CEO for 2 more weeks while I got up to speed. Then I would formally take over. Patricia started crying. Derek put his arm around her and said we'd discuss this privately. As a family. I didn't feel like we were family anymore. That night, I stayed late at the research facility. I'd been given a key and access to Gran's old office. The office Derek had been using, but that was about to be mine again. I sat at her desk and looked around. She'd kept it simple. A few photos on the wall, her degrees, a picture of us together from my university graduation. Then I noticed something. The bottom drawer of her desk had a lock on it. An old-fashioned lock, the kind that needed a physical key. I remembered that lock. Gran used to keep a key on a chain around her neck. At the funeral, Patricia had taken it along with Gran's other jewelry. But I knew something Patricia didn't. When I was 12, Gran had shown me where she kept a spare key. Just in case, she'd said. Secrets are only useful if someone you trust can find them. The spare key was taped under the rim of a picture frame, the photo of us at my graduation. My hands were shaking as I pulled the frame off the wall and found the small brass key still there. The drawer opened smoothly. Inside were 3 things. A USB drive, a sealed envelope with my name on it, and a leather journal. I opened the envelope first. My dearest Sophie, it began in Gran's handwriting. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've inherited North Star. I'm sorry to put this burden on you, but there's no one else I can trust. By now, Derek has probably shown his true colors. I want you to know that I've been aware of his intentions for quite some time. My hands were shaking harder now. 18 months ago, I began to suspect financial irregularities. Small things at first. Expenses that didn't quite add up. Consulting fees paid to companies I'd never heard of. I hired a private forensic accountant to audit the books quietly. What she found was disturbing. Derek has been siphoning money from North Star. He created several shell companies and has been billing the company for services that were never provided. In total, he's stolen approximately $3.2 million. I felt sick. I confronted him 6 months ago. He denied everything and threatened to convince Patricia to challenge my competency. He said he'd have me declared mentally unfit and take control of the company through her. I realized then that he'd been planning this for years. He didn't marry Patricia because he loved her. He married her to get access to North Star. The letter went on. Gran explained that she'd gathered evidence, bank statements, emails, recorded phone calls. Everything was on the USB drive. She'd also installed monitoring software on the company's financial systems that tracked every transaction Derek made. She'd kept quiet about it because she needed to protect Patricia and ensure that Derek couldn't manipulate the situation. I've arranged everything so that you'll have control of the company and the evidence to protect yourself. Dr. Okonkwo and Helen Martinez know part of this story. They're loyal to North Star and to you. Trust them. Be strong, Sophie. And remember that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling their bad choices. Patricia needs to see who Derek really is, even if it breaks her heart. The letter was dated 4 months before Gran died. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. The files were meticulously organized. Spreadsheets showing wire transfers to shell companies. Email threads where Derek discussed his long-term strategy with business partners. There were even audio recordings of phone calls where he bragged about how easy it was to manipulate Patricia. I listened to one recording. Derek's voice, casual and cruel. "Catherine's not going to last forever. Once she's gone, I'll have Patricia sign over her shares." The old woman made it too easy, honestly. Patricia never wanted anything to do with the business. She'll hand it over without a fight. I sat in that office until 3 in the morning, reviewing everything. Then I called Miss Ashford. "I need to file a complaint," I said, "and I need to do it before Derek realizes what's happening." Miss Ashford was quiet for a moment. "What did you find?" "Everything," I said. The next week was a blur. Miss Ashford brought in a legal team. We filed a civil complaint against Derek for embezzlement and fraud. We also filed for an emergency injunction to freeze his access to company accounts and remove him from all management positions, effective immediately. Derek found out when the police showed up at North Star to execute a search warrant. I wasn't there, but Helen told me about it later. Derek apparently kept insisting there must be some mistake. He called Patricia, who rushed to the office in a panic. That's when things got really bad. Patricia called me that evening. "What have you done?" she screamed into the phone. "The police are questioning Derek. They're talking about fraud charges. They froze our bank accounts." "Sophie, how could you do this to me?" "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "Derek stole $3 million from Gran's company. There's evidence." "Evidence that you manufactured," Patricia said. "You're doing this because you're jealous. You always wanted Gran's approval more than anything. Now, you're trying to destroy my marriage." "Patricia, I have recordings." "I don't want to hear it," she said. "You're not going to get away with this. Derek's lawyer says we can fight the will. You manipulated a sick old woman. We're going to prove it." She hung up. I sat on my couch in my temporary apartment and cried. Not because of Patricia's accusations, but because I realized Gran had been right. Patricia would rather believe I was lying than face the truth about her husband. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Derek's lawyers tried to get the charges dismissed, but Miss Ashford's team had done their homework. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records don't lie. Email servers keep everything. Derek's first strategy was to claim the shell companies were legitimate consulting businesses. That fell apart when investigators discovered he was the sole owner and the companies had done no actual work. His second strategy was to blame subordinates. That fell apart when those subordinates provided testimony that Derek had personally directed all the fraudulent transactions. His third strategy was to go after me personally. Derek filed a countersuit, claiming I'd conspired with Dr. Okonkwo and Helen to fabricate evidence against him. He claimed Gran had been suffering from dementia when she wrote the will. He submitted medical records showing she'd been on blood pressure medication and suggested that proved cognitive decline. Patricia backed him up. She gave a deposition claiming I'd always been manipulative, that I'd isolated Gran from the rest of the family, that Gran had been afraid of me at the end. That one hurt. The judge wasn't impressed. Gran's doctor testified that she'd been in excellent mental health. Her lawyer testified that she'd been explicit about her reasons for leaving the company to me, and then Miss Ashford played the recordings. I wasn't in court that day, but Miss Ashford told me Patricia walked out halfway through. She'd heard her husband's voice, casual and cold, discussing how he'd planned everything, how he'd targeted Patricia specifically because she was Catherine Reed's daughter, how he'd pretended to fall in love with her. "He married me for the company," Patricia said when she called me that night. Her voice was hollow. 5 years. I thought he loved me. "I'm sorry," I said. "And I meant it." "Mom tried to warn me," Patricia said. "I didn't listen. I thought she was just being controlling. But she knew. She knew the whole time, and she still tried to protect me." We didn't talk about the lawsuit, but 2 days later, Patricia withdrew her challenge to the will. A week after that, she filed for divorce. Derek was arrested. The criminal charges included wire fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying corporate documents. His bail was set at $2 million. He couldn't make it. Last I heard, he was still in jail, awaiting trial. The civil case was settled quickly once the criminal charges stuck. Derek's assets were seized to repay what he'd stolen from North Star. It wouldn't be everything, but it was something. I took over as CEO of North Star Pharmaceuticals 3 months after Gran's death. The transition wasn't smooth. Some of the older employees were skeptical of someone my age running things. But I had Dr. Okonkwo and Helen backing me up, and I'd spent years learning from Gran. I knew the business. My first major decision was about those unprofitable research divisions Derek had wanted to sell off. We had 3 ongoing research projects for rare pediatric diseases. The patient populations were tiny. The revenue potential was minimal. But these were kids who had no other options. I called a company meeting. All departments. I stood in front of 147 employees and said, "My grandmother built this company on a simple principle. Medicine shouldn't just be about profit. It should be about helping people who need help. We're keeping every research division. We're doubling down on rare disease treatments. And yes, that means we'll probably make less money than we could if we focused on more profitable drugs. But that's not why we're here." Dr. Okonkwo started clapping. Then Helen. Then the whole room. We lost some of the business-focused employees. A few executives quit because they disagreed with the direction. That was fine. We hired researchers who shared Gran's vision. People who cared more about impact than quarterly earnings. Patricia and I met for coffee 6 months after everything settled. She looked different, tired, but also somehow lighter. She'd moved back to Halifax. She was living in Gran's old house, the one she'd inherited. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I said terrible things." "You were hurting," I said. "That's not an excuse," Patricia said. "You were right about Derek. Mom was right about Derek. I just didn't want to see it." We talked for 2 hours. She asked about the company. I told her about the new research initiatives. She told me about her therapy sessions and her divorce proceedings. "I think Mom left the company to you because she knew you'd protect it," Patricia said. "I would have just sold it." I never understood why it mattered so much to her. "It mattered because of the people it helps," I said. Last month, we got FDA approval for a treatment that helps kids with a rare metabolic disorder. There are only about 300 cases in Canada. No big pharmaceutical company would ever develop this drug because the market's too small. But those 300 kids now have a chance at normal lives. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Mom would have been proud of you." "She would have been proud of you too," I said. "You got out of a bad situation. That takes courage." "Sophie," Patricia said, "I know I don't deserve to ask, but could we try to rebuild? Not as business partners, just as family." I thought about Gran. About her letter. About how she'd said sometimes the kindest thing is to stop enabling bad choices, but also that family matters. "I'd like that," I said. "It's been 2 years now. North Star is thriving. We've launched 4 new treatments. We're still not the most profitable pharmaceutical company in Atlantic Canada, but we're the most trusted. Patients know that when we develop a drug, it's because they need it, Not because we'll make millions. Patricia and I have dinner every week. She's dating again, slowly. She's cautious now, but she's healing. She even joined the board of directors at North Star. Not because she wants to run the company, but because she wants to honor Gran's legacy. Derek's trial happened last year. He was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. He got 8 years. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt sad for everyone involved. I still work in Gran's office. I kept everything the way she had it, the degrees on the wall, the photo of us at my graduation, the locked drawer where I found her letter. Sometimes I'll sit at her desk after everyone's gone home, and I'll read that letter again, the part where she says, "Be strong, Sophie." And remember that, sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling their bad choices. She was right. About Derek, about Patricia, about me. I've learned that protecting someone's legacy isn't about preserving buildings or bank accounts. It's about preserving their values. Gran didn't build North Star to make money. She built it to help people who had nowhere else to turn. That's what I'm protecting now. I've also learned that standing up to family is one of the hardest things you can do, but sometimes it's the most loving. If I hadn't exposed Derek, he would have destroyed the company and continued manipulating Patricia. By standing firm, even when it hurt, I helped both Patricia and North Star. And I've learned that being given something valuable doesn't mean you deserve it yet. You have to grow into it. Every day, I work to become the person Gran believed I could be, the person worthy of her trust. Last week, a mother brought her daughter to visit the research facility. Her daughter has one of the rare diseases we're treating. She's 7 years old, and because of our medication, she can go to school like other kids. She can play. She has a future. The mother shook my hand and said, "Thank you for not giving up on rare diseases. Thank you for caring about the kids no one else will help." I thought about Gran, about how she spent 50 years building something that mattered, about how she trusted me to protect it. "My grandmother taught me that business is about more than profit," I said. "It's about purpose. And some purposes are worth fighting for, even when it's hard." That little girl is why I fought Derek. Why I stood up to Patricia. Why I'm still here every day, working to grow North Star into something even better than what Gran left behind. The lesson isn't just about inheritance or betrayal or revenge. It's about knowing what matters and having the courage to protect it. It's about setting boundaries, even with family, especially with family. It's about understanding that enabling someone's worst behavior isn't love, it's harm. Gran knew all of this. She tried to teach Patricia, but Patricia wasn't ready to learn. So she taught me instead. And now I'm teaching others, one rare disease treatment at a time, that some things matter more than money. Some legacies are worth fighting for. And sometimes the people who fight hardest for them aren't the ones you'd expect. They're the ones who understand that inheritance isn't just about what you receive, it's about what you do with it afterward. That's what Gran gave me. Not just a company, not just money, but the understanding that with great gifts come great responsibilities, and the courage to face those responsibilities, even when the cost is high. I keep her picture on my desk. Sometimes I talk to it, tell her about challenges I'm facing. I think she'd be happy with how things turned out. Not perfect, nothing ever is, but honest. Real. True to the values she spent a lifetime building. And that, in the end, is the only inheritance that really matters.